It took brave men and women to say that if the oppression of Africans is lawful, then such a law is unjust and must be opposed. We are anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist, anti-sexist organization which believes in democracy and socialism as a means of uplifting ordinary masses of our people.
Julius Malema's recent visit to Nigeria to address the Nigerian Bar Association's 2025 Annual General Conference reignited a powerful dialogue on the parallels between himself and Nigerian activist politician Omoyele Sowore. Both men are prominent African political figures known for their impassioned activism and leadership of officially recognized opposition parties. Malema heads South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF, while Sowore leads Nigeria's African Action Congress, AAC. Beyond this shared duality of activism and politics, they embody radical socio-political ideologies that call for systemic change. Sowore advocates a revolution and the eradication of Nigeria's 1999 constitution, while Malema is known for his call for the uncompensated redistribution of land and Marxist-inspired rhetoric, sometimes sparking calls to his supporters to violently reclaim white-owned land. Both have led protests within their countries to mobilize political change. The AAC was founded in 2018 by Omoyele Sowore, a veteran human rights activist, journalist, and perennial presidential candidate known for his relentless fight against corruption and impunity in Nigeria. Born out of Sowore's activism roots, particularly his Revolution Now movement, advocating mass protests against government failures, the AAC was designed as a political party to channel youth frustration and demand systemic change at the ballot box. Sowore first contested the Nigerian presidency under the AAC banner in the 2019 general elections. Although a newcomer compared to Nigeria's major political parties, AAC's presence injected a fresh, radical alternative to the entrenched political establishment. The party's platform emphasizes transparency, good governance, economic empowerment of the marginalized, and an end to systemic corruption and injustice. Despite Sowore's being electoral long shots amid dominant political forces, his campaigns have energized Nigeria's youth and civil society sectors, influencing public discourse around governance and accountability. Sowore's unyielding activism has made AAC synonymous with a revolutionary spirit, advocating for total liberation and social justice, resonating beyond conventional politics. Julius Malema, born in 1981, is a firebrand founder and leader of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters. Malema was once president of the African National Congress Youth League from 2008 until his controversial expulsion in 2012 due to his incendiary speeches and radical views challenging party orthodoxy. In July 2013, Malema, together with former ANCYL deputy Floyd Shivambu, launched the EFF as a radical left-wing political force, advocating for economic emancipation through the nationalization of mines and banks, land redistribution without compensation, and anti-capitalist policies. The party quickly became a voice of South Africa's marginalized, championing social justice while wearing his signature red beret and military-style apparel. Malema contested the South African presidency as EFF's candidate in the 2014 and 2019 general elections. Though the party has not won the presidency, it made significant electoral gains, winning 6% of the vote in 2014, rising to nearly 11% in 2019, and a slight decline to just under 10% in 2024. The EFF's influence persists strongly in parliament, shaping policy debates and holding the ruling ANC accountable, making it a critical player in South Africa's multi-party democracy. In addition to these parallels, two more striking similarities emerge. First, both Sowore and Malema have demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of state repression. Sowore has endured multiple arrests, detentions, and attempts to silence his activism while continuing to contest elections and demand accountability. Likewise, Malema has faced several legal battles, bans, and political persecution, but has transformed these challenges into platforms for his continued influence and growth in South African politics. Second, both leaders harness mass mobilization and youth engagement as fundamental strategies to sustain their political movements. They have galvanized large segments of disenfranchised youth with their calls for economic freedom, anti-corruption, and radical restructuring, all themes resonating deeply with Africa's burgeoning young population, demanding justice and opportunity. While Nnamdi Kanu, the separatist advocate for an independent Biafra state, is another influential figure in Nigeria's activist landscape, his approach contrasts sharply with Sowore's and Malema's. Kanu's strategy has largely been conducted from overseas and centered on ethno-regional independence, often disconnected from formal political participation within Nigeria's constitutional structures. This detachment has limited its effectiveness in transforming the widespread systemic corruption and oligarchic control plaguing Nigeria's governance. In contrast, Sowore and Malema remain engaged within their national systems, forming political parties, contesting elections, and pushing reforms from inside the political arena. This pragmatic political participation, coupled with relentless activism, positions them uniquely as agents of change capable of driving sustainable reforms. Malema's speech to the Nigerian Bar Association echoed this Pan-African call for active engagement. He urged legal professionals to not only defend laws, but to courageously oppose unjust systems, a message aligning with Sowore's revolutionary activism, but framed within a constitutional and political struggle. Kanu's separatist campaign would serve Nigeria and the wider continent better by emulating this model of active political participation rather than relying on external advocacy and ethnocentric isolation.
And ally of South Africa and her people. I'm humbled that you saw it fit to invite me to give an address to annual general conference, and by extension, that you saw it necessary to invite the EFF to give this keynote address. I imagine it was not an easy for a group of members of the law profession to reach consensus on who will address them, because your profession by nature is one of robust debate and contestation. So I understand here today. I stand here today proud because I know I'm a product of a robust debate and agreement by people who find it difficult to agree amongst themselves. Comrades and friends, the link between the legal profession and the cause for liberation cannot be separated. Because just like us, you are instruments of justice. While we wage our battle for freedom in the picket lines through activism, protest, and participation in governance, it is you, the members of the legal profession, who interpret the laws we make, who practice the justice we seek to achieve, and who fight tirelessly for those who cannot defend themselves in the courts of law. It is a profession characterized by sacrifice, intellect, and a commitment to interpretation of the past in order to achieve justice, fairness, and victory in the present and future. For the activists, we have a history and dialectical materialism to guide us into leading society towards a better tomorrow. And for the legal profession, you have indigenous law, common law, case law, the Constitution and statutes, an objective reality to achieve not only personal victory, but to establish collectively laws that will govern others for decades to come. Our duty, however, and primary responsibility is not to maintain laws simply because they exist as they are today. Our duty is not to be instruments of injustice and neocolonialism. It is to be agents of change, and this demands of us to be brave enough to identify unjust laws, speak out, and form part of those that work tirelessly for our judiciary to be of service to our people. I say this not to encourage anarchy or lawlessness, but to draw us back to the difficult truth and reality that at times the laws has been used as a weapon of oppression. It has taken lawyers and activists to walk side by side, hand in hand, to stand up against laws that perpetuate the undermining of the dignity of the people. And we must all be alive to this history and this possibility today. This becomes even more important for us as Africans because for centuries, our very existence has been unlawful in the eyes of the oppressor. Our indigenous laws have been treated as inferior to Roman Dutch law or English law. To be an African has meant that for generations we are not worthy of the laws and the rights that make us human beings. And for that reason, it was legal to abuse us, to enslave us, to steal our mineral wealth and oil, and to destroy and kill our heritage, history, and even our lives. The legal profession you belong to, the political system we belong to, the judiciary and parliaments were created without us in mind. They were crafted at our exclusion and built to sustain our suffering. We now sit in the corridors which were built to break the back and the soul of African people. The demand then from those who died at the hands of this institution that we now serve is that we transform them so that they become instruments of the people. The demand then from those who died at the hands of this institute to maintain the status quo. But we are here to make our profession serve the African child. I wish to remind you that it was once legal to come to the shores of our great continent and kidnap Africans and enslave us in foreign lands. It was once legal to rape African women and children because they did not have the right to dignity of their European oppressors. It was once legal to take our land and our minerals because, according to the law of the white man, we were not civilized enough to control our own land and our own wealth. In South Africa, our freedom, our oppression, our resistance all had law at the center of it. Under apartheid, it was legal to restrict the movement of Africans to labor reserves called townships and to teach us inferior education so that we could only be servants of white masters. All of those problems were legal, and it took brave men and women to say that if the oppression of Africans is lawful, then such a law is unjust and must be opposed. Today, as our continent is troubled by corruption, leaders who utilize state machinery to sustain their rule at the expense of the poor and the African lives in abject poverty. A question we all ought to ask ourselves is whether the time for the legal profession and the activists to once again stand up for what is right. We must all ask ourselves whether the time has not once again arrived for liberation to be achieved against the sale of our nation to recolonization, and whether this fight must not begin by reimagining our laws for the better. We must therefore reach into this deep history of resistance and solidarity which is shared by our two nations in order to achieve the goal of restoring the humanity of Africa and her people. My brothers and sisters, the humanity of Africa is at the center of what the EFF stands for. We are an organization that was formed in 2013 purely out of the demands of the people of South Africa who wanted an alternative to the former liberation movement to achieve economic freedom in our lifetime. We are an organization which is born out of the blood of slain mine workers in an area known as Marikana, where 34 miners were shot down execution style, and the 13th anniversary of their execution was this month on the 16th of August 2025. Yet the families have not seen any justice. No one has answered for this grave injustice. It is out of this deep pain and disregard for African life that the domestic workers, miners, gardeners, petrol attendants, street dwellers, university students, professionals, and ordinary people of South Africa demanded that we form the economic freedom fighters. We were formed to complete the liberation struggle, which was faced by compromise, betrayal, and corruption of the mission for the return of the land and wealth of South Africa to the hands of the people. As a result, we base our struggle on these lived realities, and we are guided by a scientific ideological outlook of Marxism, Leninism, and the teachings of Frantz Fanon. Fanon, in the context of Africa, becomes most important as we face with a continent that is becoming more and more dependent on the former colonial master, and our liberation movement abandoned the struggle which led to the formation in favor of life of opulence while the people suffer. We are Marxist because we believe in the inherent need of an alternative economic system to capitalism, and we use the science of dialectics to wage our struggle for liberation. We are Leninist because we believe in the need for a vanguard party of the people to lead the struggle, one which believes in internal democracy and the waging of struggle in parliament, the judiciary, and at a grassroots level. We are anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist, anti-sexist organization which believes in democracy and socialism as a means of uplifting ordinary masses of our people. At the foundation of the EFF are what we refer to as the 7 non-negotiable cardinal pillars, which are expropriation of South Africa's land without compensation for equal redistribution in use, nationalization of mines, banks, and other strategic sectors of the economy without compensation, building state and government capacity, which will lead to abolishment of tenders, free decolonized education, healthcare, houses, and sanitation, massive protected industrial development to create millions of sustainable jobs, including introduction of minimum wages in order to close the wage gap between the rich and the poor, massive development of African economy, and advocating for a move from reconciliation to justice in the entire continent. Open, accountable, corrupt-free government and society without fear of victimization by state agencies. These are briefly the guiding principles which make us as the EFF a revolutionary movement. Compatriots, the need to do away with injustice of the past demand that we create laws for the future, because independence does not automatically mean that infrastructure of our legal system itself becomes independent. Our duty as lawmakers, as practitioners post-independence, demands of us to scrutinize existing laws and where necessary make amendments or even introduce new laws to liberate our people from the parasitic oppression that they are exposed to. The EFF, which has been in Parliament of South Africa since 2014, is engaged in this practice, and we have been able to implement our vision, mission, and identity into our approach to governance and lawmaking. A few examples of how we have interpreted what needs to change at the level of governance and legislation in South Africa to enhance the cause for liberation is to the introductions of the bills that were put before Parliament. The nationalization of the Reserve Bank bill, which seeks to place full control of South Africa's Reserve Bank, particularly monetary policy, in the hands of the state. Further to this bill introduced by the EFF in Parliament seeks to broaden the mandate of the Reserve Bank in South Africa, which currently has private shareholding, towards alleviating unemployment and curbing economic stagnation, which is due to the Reserve Bank conservative and financial sector-orientated policy outlook. The Public Finance Management Amendment Bill will in South Africa deal with a problem facing the whole continent, and that is the unregulated borrowing of the money by our government from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. This bill, which we have introduced as the EFF, will require that National Treasury in South Africa first seek approval from Parliament to source foreign loans and establish transparency regarding such loans and their conditionalities. The debt trap of Africa to our foreign colonizers must be stopped, and that begins by regulating these loans that our leaders commit future generations to, because they will not be there when the colonizers come to collect. The Student Debt Cancellation Bill is a piece of legislation introduced by the EFF to ease the debt burden of young students who cannot access their qualification, seek employment using their qualification, or pursue postgraduate studies because their qualifications are withheld due to debt. Student debt is an obstacle to the youth who have no source of income because they cannot access their degrees, and equally cannot generate a source of income because they cannot prove that they are qualified due to their qualification being withheld. The need to unlock this qualification possesses a major opportunity to grow our expertise in our country and promote education to be at the center of our developmental objective. Insourcing Bill seeks to do away with the exploitation of labor brokers and consultancy firms which are draining the public finance of government in South Africa. In our country, the most basic of service which ought to be conducted through internal capacity are done on contractual basis and at inflated prices. The policy of outsourcing is at the center of corruption as politicians establish companies to provide services such as cleaning, security services, accounting services, maintenance services, and many more to government at a ridiculous rate. How can you issue a tender to buy toilet paper? How come Director General doesn't know where the toilet papers are being sold and go and buy the toilet papers himself instead of issuing out a tender that is unnecessary? There are certain things that can be done by the government without involving the outside players. We don't want alcohol advertised in South Africa because they advertise alcohol through the means that is not a true reflection of alcohol. Why are you not advertising alcohol with drunkards and show people what alcohol will do to them? It cannot be that alcohol is advertised only with beautiful people at the beach. It must be a true reflection of what this will do to you. We have done the same before by banning the advertisement of cigarette in South Africa, and what is to follow is alcohol. The EFF is also engaged in many other programs that seeks to empower our own communities and make sure that there is local procurement. Why should a prison in Enugu should go and buy vegetables in Lagos? They must buy where they are to promote local economy and to promote their own economic growth. We cannot allow a situation where people who do not come from where we come from are actually not benefiting from what their government can provide. Compatriots, I must reiterate once again that it is a deep honor to stand before you today in Nigeria, in Enugu State, a country that holds a special place in the hearts of all South Africans who understand history, who value solidarity, who appreciate the sacrifice made by others in the cause of our freedom. Nigeria is not just another African country to us. It is a comrade nation, one that stood firmly by our side during our darkest hour. When South Africa was shackled by apartheid, when our people were murdered, imprisoned, and denied basic humanity, Nigeria rose as a giant for justice, placing South Africa squarely at the center of its foreign policy. Former President Murtala Mohammed famously declared that Africa had come of age, that the continent will no longer tolerate interference from outside powers, and this still rings true today. Nigeria set up the Southern African Relief Fund, mobilizing its citizens to contribute to the liberation struggle. Even as it faced its own challenges at home, these initiatives raised millions of dollars to support the liberation of South Africa. People paid directly from their salaries to contribute to the liberation of the people of South Africa. Nigerian students sacrificed a portion of their income through the Mandela Tax, which supported an educational training program for black South Africans, and successive Nigerian governments never stopped in their material and moral support for South Africa's liberation. In fact, Nigerian government boycotted the 1976 Olympic Games and the 1979 Commonwealth Games in protest and in opposition to apartheid government. We cannot forget all those who stood by us during difficult times. Nor can we forget that when Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990, one of his earliest international visits was to Lagos and Abuja to personally thank the Nigerian people. This gesture, our foundation of a bond sealed in blood and sacrifice. However, this history must not remain in the past. This bond between South Africa and Nigeria must be carried forward into the present, not just in political sentiment, but in concrete economic collaboration. Both our nations stand as giants of the continent. South Africa, with its industrial base, mining capacity, and advanced financial system. Nigeria, with its vast population, vibrant entrepreneurial spirit, oil and gas resources, and cultural dynamism that has captured the imagination of the world. Together, we hold the keys to Africa's industrialization and economic independence. Consider what lies beneath our soils. Nigeria is blessed with abundant oil, natural gas, and growing agricultural sector. South Africa holds some of the richest deposits of platinum, gold, manganese, and coal in the world. Combined, we possess the minerals that power modern technology, the energy resources that fuel global industry, and the human capital to build a self-sufficient continent. Yet, both our nation remains trapped in neo-colonial arrangements where our raw materials are extracted cheaply and exported to Europe, America, and Asia, only to be sold back to us at crazy prices as finished goods. This is a cycle of dependency we must break. The path forward is clear. Nigeria and South Africa must industrialize together, build factories together, and process our resources on African soil. Imagine a joint program where South African mining expertise is combined with Nigerian oil wealth to create African-owned energy and resources conglomerate, one that refines, processes, and manufactures for Africa and the world. Imagine agricultural cooperation where Nigeria fertile lands provide food security for the continent, supported by South African machinery, logistics, and technology. Imagine a collaborative investment in renewable energy, where South Africa's solar potential and Nigeria gas reserves are harnessed to build an integrated African power grid. Already, we have glimpses of what is possible. South African companies such as MTN, SPAR, ShopRite, and MultiChoice have made significant inroads in Nigeria, creating jobs and bringing services. Nigerian businesses, investors, and cultural industries have equally expanded to South Africa. Nigerian music, filmmakers, writers influence South African culture, just as South African universities and industries provide platforms for Nigerian talent. But this cooperation has been uneven and at times marked by suspicion and the painful experience of xenophobia. Let me be unequivocal here. Xenophobia is a betrayal of African unity. It is a sickness born of poverty, inequality, and government failure. But its victims are our African brothers and sisters. Nigerians, Zimbabweans, Congolese, and Somalis are not the cause of the South Africa's unemployment crisis. The cause lies in the untransformed economy of South Africa, which remains in the hands of white minority and multinational corporations who continue to exploit labor while refusing to industrialize. Attacking fellow Africans diverts anger from the real enemy, and we must educate our people that unity, not division, is the solution to the African crisis. If we want to end one-way migration, where Nigerians are forced to leave home in search of opportunity in South Africa, we must integrate our economies. Young Nigerian engineers should be able to work in Johannesburg, Gaborone, Windhoek, Harare, Cairo, and Accra, not as foreigners, but as Africans contributing to Africa. South African entrepreneurs should be able to set up in Lagos without suspicion, but with support as partner in the shared future. We must harmonize trade policies, align visa regimes, and build continental infrastructure that connects our people. We actually do not need a visa. We don't need a visa between South Africa and Nigeria. In the same way, we don't need a visa for our people to travel in their own continent. We are one. Both South Africa and Nigeria know the pain of colonialism. Both have faced internal divisions. Both have enjoyed the pressures of global imperialism that seeks to divide and exploit and control us. Both know that the only path forward is Pan-African solidarity. We must reject the illusion that our salvation will come from Washington, London, Brussels, or Beijing. Our salvation lies here in Lagos and Johannesburg, in Abuja and Pretoria, in the hands of Africans who refuse to be divided. Together, Nigeria and South Africa can lead African continent free trade area not as a paper agreement, but as a living reality that changes the lives of ordinary people. Together, we can demand fair trade, protect our industries, and invest in education, technology, innovation. Together, we can prove that Africa is not a begging bowl, but a continent of giants. We must prove to the whole world that we are not xenophobic, we love one another. Black people are not loved in Africa and are not loved outside Africa. We have a duty to love ourselves and show the whole world on how it must treat us. We cannot treat each other badly and expect other people to treat us much better. How you treat your own brother and your own sister, it's how you teach others outside how they must treat you. The unity of our continent is paramount, and we must never associate with any xenophobic agenda that perpetuates the divisions in South Africa. Solidarity is what we need for each other. My comrades, as I close, I want to state that as Africans, our fight has never been confined to the borders. From the very beginning, the struggle of South Africa against apartheid, we knew that suffering of one oppressed people anywhere in the world is the suffering of all oppressed people everywhere. It was in that spirit that South Africa, during its liberation struggle, was embraced by Nigeria and other African nations, who declared that apartheid was not simply a South African problem, but an African and global crime. It is in that same spirit that today we say our liberation as Africans will remain incomplete if we turn a blind eye to the struggles of those who continue to suffer under occupation, colonialism, imperialism, and economic exploitation. It is this tradition of solidarity that compels us today to speak clearly on the struggle of other oppressed people. The EFF continues to stand firmly with Western Sahara, Palestine, Cuba, Haiti, the Democratic Republic of Congo as a commitment to international law and justice. In Western Sahara, Morocco's continued occupation violates the principle of the United Nations Charter and the African Union's Constitutive Act, both of which enshrined the right to self-determination. The International Court of Justice affirmed in 1975 that Morocco had no sovereignty over Western Sahara, yet decades later, the Sahrawi people remain dispossessed. In Palestine, we are witnessing one of the gravest violations of international law in modern history. The apartheid regime of Israel has for decades defied UN resolutions, the Geneva Conventions, and international humanitarian law. Collective punishment, the bombing of hospitals, the illegal taking of land, the killing of children, and the deliberate starvation of populations are crimes under the Roman Statute of the International Criminal Court. The world cannot remain neutral in the face of genocide. And just as apartheid South Africa was declared a crime against humanity, so too must be the international community recognize and act against Israel's apartheid and genocide. The importance of fighting on the level of the law was made evident in this case when the South African government took Israel to International Court of Justice to report their crimes when no other country will do so. This fight in international court was won when the court declared that indeed Israel was perpetuating genocide, a win that was necessary to sway some support away from Israel and to embolden other countries to speak out. This fight also led to the International Criminal Court to issue a warrant of arrest for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Minister of Defense for war crimes. This is the power of the legal fraternity in the global fight for the oppressed. However, the ICJ pace is slow and final judgment on charging Israel with genocide has not occurred yet. We must therefore confront the uncomfortable truth that the slow pace of these proceedings is not accidental, but reflects a global legal order designed and maintained under white supremacy. International law is swift and ruthless when prosecuting leaders of the global south, yet hesitant and cautious when dealing with crimes committed by Western powers or their allies. This is hypocrisy we must name without fear. When an African leader is accused, indictments are issued overnight, sanctions are imposed immediately, military interventions justified under the banner of international law. However, when Israel stabs children in Gaza or the United States and its allies invade nations and topples governments, the same institutions suddenly discover restraint, complicity, and delay. As the legal fraternity of Africa, you cannot accept this double standard. You must be bold enough to create alternative and fair systems of accountability that do not bend to imperialist interests. If the so-called international community is unwilling to deliver justice in real time, then Africa must advance its own courts, its own tribunals, its own instruments of solidarity and protection. Just as we build liberation movements when colonialism denied us freedom, so too must we build new legal institutions when the existing ones fail us. In Cuba, for over 60 years, the United States has imposed an economic blockade in contravention of international law, including the principle of non-interference and the sovereign right of nations to choose their social and economic system. Despite this, Cuba has demonstrated a profound commitment to human solidarity, sending doctors across the globe, including to Africa, welcoming Africans into their classrooms and participating in the liberation of the oppressed. Cuba never sent their soldiers anywhere to kill anyone. Instead, they sent their doctors all over to go and save life. The tragedy of Haiti is one of historical injustice. Haiti's revolution was first declaration of black freedom in the modern world, yet it was punished with centuries of economic sabotage and enforced debt. Contrary to any principle of justice, today, Haiti suffers from foreign interference, the denial of sovereignty, and the imposition of external governance. International law demands reparation, debt cancellation, and the withdrawal of foreign forces so that Haiti can govern itself in dignity. We have seen DRC not experiencing peace because of its mineral resources. We must stand with DRC and demand that there must be permanent peace in DRC and everywhere else in Africa. Because DRC without peace, it will never experience economic growth. We are because DRC it is. We are the people of Southern Sudan. We must make sure that no single corner of Africa there are guns where Africans are killing each other. Africans must always be together against the enemy forces who want to exploit our country. We are here today to reclaim our land. We want the land of Africa to be returned to Africa because it belongs to the Africans. We want the minerals of Africa to be returned to the Africans because that's where they belong. We want to build industries in Africa and process our minerals here in Africa. We've got the capacity. We must never allow the imperialist forces to divide us in order to take our minerals from us. We demand one Africa. We demand borderless Africa. We demand Africa with one president, with one currency, with one military command, with one parliament, because we know the currency of Africa will be much more stronger against the American currency. We don't care what Trump thinks of us. He will never choose a policy position for Africans. We are not subject of Trump. We must refuse to be subjects of Trump. We must stand together as the world changes and show the world that Africa is one and Africa is equal to all nations, to China, to Russia, to America. We are not just a small nation. We are a big nation. We are not a dark continent. How can we be dark when we've got diamond that is shining amongst us? We are a shining nation. I thank you.